If you don't have goals, if you don't have a purpose, and if you don't know the answer to the question, what's my why? That's WHY. Then what's the point? I see so many people and they have all these questions and stress and anxiety over their lives and their finances and their families. And my first question is, what do you want? What do you want your life to look like? Can you picture a life that is more fulfilling, that has more security, that's just more fun? That's the question that kept coming up in my mind. It's no surprise with this book, Simon Sinek's Find Your Why. I think it's on my top 10 reading list for anyone. I would recommend it to anyone to read and probably reread, especially in those transition moments in life. So if you find yourself in one of those places, here's 10 quotes, 10 of my favorite takeaways. And each one I'm going to spin off a reflection question and a few bullet points of my own responses. So let's get into it. The first one is working hard for something we don't care about is called stress. Working hard for something that we love is called passion. And knowing the difference between what your stress is and what your passion is going to guide you so clearly in life. So here's a question for you. How can you identify the difference between stress and passion in your work and any other pursuits? And what steps can you take to align your efforts with things that you genuinely care about? So here's three things that I took away from it. One, reflecting on the emotions and feelings associated with various tasks or projects to discern between what's a stress and what's a passion. One way to look at this is with music. You see all this behind me if you're watching this on YouTube or on Spotify. Music for me has been both. It's been a passion and a stress in my life. I have a degree in music. I was a music major and it became school. It became work. And that was a stressful time, but it's also could be so fulfilling. Sometimes they're mixed together. Being able to differentiate in the moment, living in the moment and not living in your own head 10 years from now. Sometimes your passions can become stressors, and sometimes you can become passionate about what stresses you out. That's parenting right there. Sometimes I'm working on a big deal. A lot of my income is commission based. And so if I'm working on a big deal and that's something where I think this is going to fix the minivan, and that can be stressful and take a passion and maybe turn the wrong way. And a lot of that is in your perspective, in your mind. I'll see that unlocked later in these things. Here's number two, assessing the alignment of personal values and interests with whatever work you're doing. If you're aligned with your values and your work, then that in and of itself can be a vehicle for inspiring passion in what you're doing. If there's a misalignment, if you find yourself working on something, I get real stressed out. If I have a client that asks me to lie about something and to bend the rules, then it stresses me out because it directly conflicts with my value system. Check out other videos that I had very recently about defining what your value system is and identifying your code and your own personal guide in what you do and how you do it. Like Ikigai, that's a great way of an exercise of defining your why and your passions. That's just last week's episode. So the next one is exploring ways to integrate elements of passion into your existing habits, routines, responsibilities, or consider making a bigger shift, not just incorporating what you're already doing, but do something different that follows those pursuits. This book can be great if you're in a transition point in life, because if you're transitioning into a new job or a new place to live or a new relationship, then really define how that's going to affect your values and really decide if that's something you're passionate about. Is it really worth it? A lot of us have a hard time saying no to things. And the easiest way to say no to something is if it directly conflicts with your values and your passions. And if you know what those are, if you've written them down, it's a lot easier to use that as a guide or a compass. Here's the second quote that I found really valuable in this book. Your why is the purpose, cause, or belief that inspires you to do what you do. It seems simple, but what is your why? Answer that question, your WHY. What is your why, or the driving purpose behind your actions? And how does understanding your purpose influence your choices and your decisions? A lot of times we have people in our lives that make decisions like, why'd you even do that? What are you making these crazy choices for? And sometimes their answer is, I don't know. I don't even know why I did that. Or maybe it seemed good in the moment, but now looking back on it, it was obviously a bad decision. So here's three ways to really unpack that question, maybe for yourself. The first one is engaging in introspection. That's thinking about your internal self and your self discovery to uncover your core values and motivations. So again, I think it's going to keep pointing back to what your values are and then helping define your core values so that it is something that when you're about to make a decision, you can always look back and say, what do I value? Is A or B in better alignment with my core values and my motivations, my passions? The second thing is evaluating whether current activities or goals, whatever it is you're doing, whatever your habits are, whether or not they align with whatever your why is. It seems simple, but just sit down and actually look at the time you spend, because wherever we put our time is where we're investing what we value. We measure what matters. So sit down, measure your time, your most valuable thing to invest in, and then that really reveals what you care about and what your passions are. The third element is using your why, now that you've helped define that, as a guiding compass to make meaningful and purposeful decisions in life. When you do have a decision to make, you've already sat down, you've figured out where you're investing your time, you figured out what your values are, what you want them to be, and you make decisions in that direction. It seems simple, but very few people sit down and put in the work. Third quote that I've got here is, when we work hard for something we believe in, it's called passion. This is very similar to the first one, but it really touches on hard work and how important is hard work and how countercultural is that. It's something that so few people really want to do these days. What are some examples of times when you have experienced true passion in your efforts and your work and what you're doing, and what made those experiences different from other tasks that you do? Whenever you're doing things, figuring out what inspires you, what work makes you want to do the work more. It seems simple, but how many people out there are in a dead end job or they're just working for a paycheck? There's three elements here. Recalling moments of flow. And I talk about flow a lot. Just look at last week's video with Ikigai, and it talks a lot about flow state and enthusiasm and passion during your work or whatever creative endeavors you have. Maybe it's work, as in like a typical work job that you get paid for. Maybe it's something that is good for your community that you live in, but you don't get paid for it. That's still good work. Some people might even think it's better work, but that's one example. Recalling those moments of flow enthusiasm, journaling about it, writing it down, having a note on your phone so that you can write down when you're like, wow, this really resonated with me. The second way to unpack this is identifying projects or causes that ignite a sense of purpose and dedication. Maybe that is something that you're already good at. It's something that you benefit the community around you with. It's something that other people value that you get paid for. Identifying some of those projects or causes that give you a sense of purpose and dedication. And if you find overlaps in those, then it starts to compound. It's not just 1 + 1 = 2. It's about 1 + 1 = 3 in those instances where you can find something that benefits other people. A great example would be volunteering in the community. If I can volunteer and give people financial counseling, then it's something that benefits people around me. Sometimes people pay for it, but if it's something that is a passion project of mine and something that I can really help other people with, then it can really compass 2 or 3 of my 4 different areas of life. The third element is exploring how to incorporate more passion-driven work into daily life. As I look around and I see how a lot of people are in jobs that they don't feel passionate about, and they spend so much time, maybe a third of their day is spent in something they're not passionate about. Think of it in thirds. You sleep for a third of your day, you're in this job for a third of your day, and then you have that third. And that's what a lot of people are living for, is that third. But what are you doing? You're doing chores, you're cooking, you're cleaning. You got to flip it. And that should be the work that you do to maintain your life. Whatever you're getting paid for, you should always be striving to have it be passion-driven work that you can find multiple ways, multiple facets of life that are self-fulfilling in some way. Maybe you really like baking bread. Baking a loaf of bread can be very fulfilling. Baking 100 loaves of bread isn't for everyone. Some people love that. And some people will, as soon as they bake 100 loaves of bread, they'll say, I never really want to bake a loaf of bread again in my life. If that's you, where baking a loaf of bread is your passion, then consider scaling carefully, because it may not be the thing that you want to do forever. Maybe teaching other people to bake a loaf of bread is going to be the thing that crosses multiple areas where maybe you're good at teaching and you enjoy baking, and it can be a great cross section. So get creative with that and really look at a coach out there that can really speak into your life. How can you effectively communicate those areas and explore how to incorporate more passion driven work into your daily life? I think it happens building it one piece at a time, brick by brick. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. This one has been coming up for me a lot over and over again because I am in a sales role in my day job. How can you effectively communicate your why to others to create meaningful connections and inspire support for whatever those endeavors are, for whatever the work is? There's three ways to really unpack it. One is craft a clear and compelling narrative that explains the purpose and mission behind your actions, your business, about the things that you do, whatever you're doing. Really define why you're doing it. I say write it down. Write down like a mission statement. It could be a mission statement for who you are at work, who you are in relationships, who you are in your personal life. You'll see how some of those overlap and sometimes they're a little different. The second aspect is sharing personal stories and experiences that connect with others on an emotional level. This is one where I've really been thinking a lot as a relatively new dad. I've got a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. I talk to a lot of young parents out there, really focus on young families and their financial futures. How you communicate to young kids really says a lot about who you are and your own communication skills. People don't really buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And that quote is so true, especially for kids. They really pick up on your motivations and why you do what you're doing. That's something where you can say one thing, but if you really don't believe it, they kind of can smell it. That's something that I really recommend. And I want to emphasize for anyone out there that's got young kids, really practicing that, really paying attention to not just what you're doing and what you're saying, why you're doing it and why you're saying it that way. The third thing is focusing on the value and impact of your work rather than just the features or whatever the product is. How you do what you do is more important sometimes than actually getting the job done. This is hard for me to understand. I see a lot of dads out there, and maybe this will resonate with you, but bath time sometimes for me becomes getting the job done, getting the kids clean and on to whatever the next thing is. Usually it's winding them down for bed. And I pride myself in my absolute ability to have incredibly efficient bath time. That sometimes works. And a lot of times it doesn't because I have a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old that just want to play. You have to be open and flexible to that. Sometimes set a timer, set a 3-minute timer, and they know that they got 3 minutes of just open free play. There's boundaries there, but there's a lot of freedom within those boundaries. And so 3 minutes, maybe you're thinking, oh my gosh, 3 minutes, that's so long. Some of you are thinking 3, I give them 30. It could be very subjective, but the whole point is to really set up a routine or a rhythm where they understand why you're doing it and they're buying into creating that space. Bath time doesn't just become, well, we got to do it, but it's how you're doing it that really has the greatest impact and the thing that people will remember the most. The fifth quote is a why is just a belief. That's all it is. How we bring the cause to life is the values and in the guiding principles that make us who we are. What actions can you take to live really in line and in harmony with your beliefs? How do your values align with whatever your identified why is? Here's 3 ways to unpack it. Identifying your core values, we've done that, and principles that reflect and reinforce your why. So making sure that they reflect and reinforce it in a way that they stack one on top of another. Here's one way to look at it. For me, for work, I have 3 principles. The first one is always going to be quality. We're always striving for quality. The second is speed. Speed is very important, especially in my work, that we're doing things quickly and efficiently. It's all about quality, speed, but never sacrificing quality for speed. Quality is always above. So quality is the priority and then speed, but we never go so fast that it diminishes quality. The third value is growth. If you're not growing, you're dying. But if you grow so big that it slows you down, and then if your speed is at a certain level where your quality goes away because you're not responding quick enough, you see how they really stack that way. The first priority is quality, speed, but never over quality, and then growth, but never over speed, so that the quality is always there. And so those are the 3 values. You can see how one pours into another. Your why brings out the real value of what you do. and how you do it. Identifying core values and principles that reflect and reinforce your why, one after another. Always thinking to yourself as you're making choices, just like I do with work, is this a quality decision? Is this going to slow us down? Is this counterintuitive to our growth? In that order, we're always reflecting on our values and then evaluating whether your actions and behaviors are congruent with your professional or personal beliefs. Here's the sixth quote to really unpack from this book. To be a leader, one must not just have vision, but also the ability to communicate it. This is a great commentary on leadership and really gets to a core of one of my beliefs and something that I'm always striving to grow at. So here's a reflection question. How can you enhance your leadership abilities by improving your vision and communication skills? I want to speak directly to the dads out there because your leader in your household is going to be the greatest training ground for your leader. And it's going to be the greatest ROI on any input or investment or sweat equity. Be a great leader at home and you will likely be a great leader out in the workspace. And so how can you enhance your leadership abilities? Here's three different ways. One is developing a clear and compelling vision for the future that inspires and motivates others. This can be very clear for your family. If you have family values, if you really understand trustworthiness, loyalty, friendship, kindness, faith, if these are your values as a family and you really develop a clear and compelling vision, then that's something that is going to spill over in other areas of your life. And hopefully you're going to see that being lived out in your kids' lives as well. It's worth it to really dive into your leadership abilities at home. Usually people flip it and they are awful leaders at home and they put all their effort in the workplace. I think our society would benefit if it was reversed. Great leaders at home make better leaders out in the community. The second way to unpack this question is improving your communication techniques, including active listening and effective storytelling. No one's perfect at these. We always have room to grow, but there are exceptional versions out there that we can learn so much from. If you've ever tried to explain a complicated topic to a 1, 2, or 3-year-old, if you can really take the information and incorporate it into a story, actively listen to their feedback, think about how well that translates into your workspace. Practicing this at home is going to be way more fulfilling, should be the top priority. So few people, they spend all their time trying to listen to colleagues and trying to be an effective storyteller in the workspace. And then they get home and they shut it off. It's so backwards. It should start at home and then pour over into your workspace, not the other way around. The third way is actively seeking feedback and mentorship from outside of your life and your immediate relationships to grow as a leader and a communicator. Seeking feedback also starts at home. This is the core. To be a leader, leadership starts at home. Seeking feedback needs to come from your partner, from your spouse. It's one of the hardest things that people do, especially men, because our pride gets in the way. I see this time and time again where, especially if I'm just doing something that seems simple, but it's very emotional and complicated, like working on a budget with a couple, and they're looking at their budget and they're saying, well, these are, kind of what I want. This is kind of what I need, but I'm not sure. And they try to negotiate without really communicating effectively. They always fall short of asking the question, seeking feedback on what their wants and their needs are, communicating that and meeting somewhere in the middle, because often it's, well, I want this. Well, I want that. Okay. Who's open to receiving feedback about what they just said? And it's always quiet. But if you get into the habit of it and practice it, and the great way to do that is to find people that have already been there, hopefully recently. So if you are someone that's just about to have your first kid and you have a friend that had a kid 1 or 2 years ago, that's usually the person you go to. You usually don't go to someone who had their kids 20, 30, 40 years ago and say, hey, what was it like those first few nights when you brought a kid home? It's so far gone in their memory. But great men have been where you've been, and hopefully within recent enough history that they can really recall some of those details. Sometimes seeking feedback, it's easier to go to someone that you don't have so much relational capital with as so much as your partner or spouse, but practice asking for that feedback and then consider doing it also with your spouse and really digest that information, digest that feedback, and really engage in the conversation. That's the whole point of the active listening, the effective storytelling, seeking feedback. And so leadership starts at home. Here's another quote about leadership that I thought was so interesting. Leadership is not about being in charge, it's about taking care of those in your charge. How can you prioritize the well being and growth of those that you lead? And how does this approach impact your team dynamics and success? One other way to think about this question, especially after the last one that we digested about leadership, is when you're thinking about your home life and your work life, do you see some similarities? Think about if you have a conflict in your workspace. When's the last time you had a conflict? And how could you have improved the way that you approached it with your words and your actions? Think about how if you had someone under you in your workplace and you had some tension, some conflict there, how could you have not been in charge, but really taken care of them directly and met them on their level? Here's three different ways to unpack that experience now that you're thinking about that situation that you had where there was some tension there. Cultivating what I call a servant leadership mindset. This comes back from growing up in a church and being servant leaders. It's focused on supporting and empowering team members where your job is to make sure that they're the best that they can be in those environments. I've got an assistant that works for me part-time, and she comes in and makes sure that she's as efficient and equipped as possible. In a simple way, if her computer breaks down, I'm going to replace that as quickly as possible. If she has trouble communicating something effectively to a client, I'm not just going to take it away from her and do it for her. I want her to learn how to do the things well so that she can be an effective member of the team. Another example is I have a 3-year-old son. He just went to his first soccer practice, and it was so tough for me not to want to take the role of the coach or to try to help explain how he could do X, Y, or Z. I was just in a support role. I just held the water bottle and I just cheered him on the sidelines. Every few minutes, he'd come and get a drink of water. And my role was just encouragement. It wasn't about being a leader. It was about making sure that he was being taken care of. The second way of unpacking this would be providing mentorship and opportunities for personal and professional development. So many people out there need mentors. They don't have anyone in their life that is pouring into them. In order to be a good mentor to someone, you need to be mentored. You need role models that are mentoring you so that you can pour into others. Pouring into others is going to help teach you how to ask better questions to your mentors. There used to be a very good system built in place in a tribal way where you had different generations pouring directly into others. Just a few hundred years ago, people used to live in family units where you had grandparents, parents, kids, aunts, uncles living in the same geographic location. Everything was in proximity to one another. You could really learn directly from those that are just ahead or just behind you in life. The internet's a great tool for that. You can go on Twitter and DM someone who's just a few steps ahead of you, and sometimes they'll actually reach out, especially if you have a genuine effective way of asking those questions. The best way to figure out how to ask for that mentorship is to be mentoring someone else. The third way to unpack this idea of leadership not being in charge, but taking care of those that are in your charge is celebrating with people directly, celebrating team achievements, fostering a positive and collaborative work environment. We typically do this better in a personal life than we do in our professional life. If I come home and I get a big bonus, it's pretty easy to say, oh, we're going out to eat. Typically do a better job of celebrating with those that we have relational capital with. But sometimes in a team environment at work, we have a hard time showing that level of emotions. It's not just about being frustrated or upset at things, but just showing excitement, celebrating team achievements, and fostering that sort of environment translates to both areas of life, professionally and personally. And this is my challenge to you. When you see someone that has something positive happen in their life, don't just like the post. Really reach out to them. It could be a text, it could be a phone call, but get off the platform, text someone and say, hey, I saw that happen. Really cool. Just really happy for you. If you do that 5 times, maybe 5 times a day, even if it is on that surface level, it's going to translate to huge gains in your relational capital with people and your ability to communicate what you're valuing and showing up in other people's lives. The next quote, authenticity is when you say and do the things that you actually believe. Sometimes if I read a quote and I say to myself, well, duh, Usually that's the first quote that I should be writing down because if it seems so obvious, there's probably at least one level deeper that I should be exploring. So the reflection question to take it one level deeper would be, how can you align your actions and words to demonstrate authenticity in your personal and professional life? How can you really align your actions and your words? Here's three ways to unpack that. The first one is reflecting on personal values and ensuring that decisions and behaviors align with your personal values. If you don't have your personal values defined, then your decisions are never going to reflect those. How many people out there are truly being authentic with what they do and what they say and how it aligns with what they actually believe? Especially with the internet culture of today and with so many people blurring the lines between their personal lives, their professional lives, and what I would call the darker third half being their digital lives. So many people you see, the way that they talk and the way that they act, their digital lives are bleeding over into their personal or professional lives. I'm even seeing or getting fired or getting reprimanded professionally because how they conduct themselves at home is negatively impacting their work, or how they conduct themselves online is negatively impacting their personal lives. As we see more conflict and more violence and more domestic dispute and more turnover in the workplace, those influences are showing up in ways that we haven't seen in society before now. Here's three ways to really unpack how you can be more authentic with yourself in your personal, professional, and even digital life. The first one is reflecting on personal values and ensuring that your decisions and behaviors align with them. The second one is being honest and transparent in your communication, even when it may be challenging or when there may not be something to obviously gain from that. It seems obvious. Be honest and transparent in how you're communicating, whether it be in your personal life, in your work life, or digitally online. But so few people do it. I see so many people that they seem like a different human online, and it's starting to show up in their relationships at home. Maybe they lie about who they are online and they live a double life. Well, that double life is going to bleed over into your personal life. Honesty and transparency in your communication, how you engage and what you say, really, and it doesn't just reflect what you think and what you believe. It actually affects what you think and believe. That really takes us into the third way of unpacking this is it's not just about what you say, it's about how it affects your relationships. I think building trust with others, a great way is like what we just talked about in the last quote about reaching out and celebrating with other people. Building trust with others can be done through positive and negative means. Sometimes you can, if you have relational capital with someone, if you have a friend or family member that steps out of line, you can tell them, you can say something, hey, this is a critique, but I noticed that you did that. I don't think that really reflects what you really value. If you have that relational capital, can also build trust with others. But the easiest way is just by celebrating other people and reaching out to them directly. If you consistently demonstrate that positive communication, that celebration of what's going on in their life, if you really demonstrate that you care about their life and what they're experiencing, it shows integrity and it can really help reinforce what you truly value about yourself. This next quote really stuck with me. It's another thing about leadership. Great leaders are willing to sacrifice their own interests for the good of the group. I think that we all can agree that great leaders make sure that the ones in their care are taken care of first. But I think we can go one level deeper. So here's a reflection question. How can you adopt a selfless and team-oriented approach to leadership? And what benefits can this mindset bring to the group dynamic? Not just directly, as in making sure that some of the weaker members are fed so that it raises the entire group, but what does it do to their mindset? Here's three ways to unpack this. Prioritizing the collective goals and needs of the team above personal interests really helps re-emphasize whatever your values are. Another way to put this is if you have collective goals as a family, and let's say hypothetically, this is going to resonate with some guys out there, but if your collective goals as a family are recreation, you want to have fun, it's safety, you want to make sure that everyone comes home safe, and it's security. You want to make sure that you can have consistency and lower the anxiety level of everyone in the family. These are the basic functions of a family unit. It's the first thing you think of. What we're going to do with our kids, we're going to take them out to a park. As a leader, you can really emphasize what our goals are going to the park, but why are we going? It's because going outside is good for you physically. Doing it together is good for us relationally. just really getting into like God's creation is good for us spiritually. It might seem like an obvious example. Oh, well, I can bend the values to meet whatever my personal desires are. Where we could go to the park or we could go to the golf range. This is basically the same thing. It takes us back to the quote, great leaders are willing to sacrifice their own interests for the good of the group. It may seem like an obvious example, but it's not just what you're doing, but it's about how you're doing it. The second way to unpack it will be leading by example and demonstrating a strong work ethic, dedication, perseverance for whatever the goals, the needs, and the values of the group are. We talked about our personal life. So the next context is how can we do this in the professional world? Leading by example and demonstrating a strong work ethic and dedication. It's so easy, especially in our 4-day work week trend that's happening in this world. It's so easy to slow down Thursday afternoon, Friday, kind of taking it easy into the weekend. But if you can inspire others by approaching the work itself with enthusiasm and passion, and if it's something that's intrinsically true, if you're true to yourself by demonstrating a strong work ethic and dedication, you could tell others, hey, don't slack off on Friday. But unless you're doing the work yourself, it's not going to show up. It's certainly not going to show up with young kids. They can see through that a mile away. And with your coworkers, the same way. You got to treat them like adults. And instead of telling them what to do, you got to show them how you want it done. The third way to unpack this is fostering a culture of collaboration and mutual support within the group. This is key for leadership. You got to be in the trenches with them. You see great examples of sales leaders online. A lot of the best examples are when they're in what I call the bullpen. You've got like a bunch of desks and a bunch of people on phones and they're selling, I think like Wolf of Wall Street, and they're all selling. Well, the best leaders are on the phone. The best leaders are physically engaged, fostering that culture of collaboration and mutual support. You got to be in the context. And the same is true within your family as well. I'm going to use the family budget as an example here. If you get to the end of the month and you go down your list and you say, wow, we really keep spending a lot of money on restaurants. Gosh, restaurants are like twice as expensive as they were like a couple years ago. And so I'm sure there's a lot of families out there that are dealing with this directly. You say, wow, you get to the end of the month, we overspent on restaurants again. You say, we got to cut back. I'm guilty of this as well. I probably say that most months. Oh, we ate out so much. We got to stop doing that. Instead, you got to look for a routine where everyone's engaged. We're collaborating. We're deciding on that together. We have mutual support and everyone has buy-in at the beginning. It makes it 1,000 times easier than when you get to the end of the month and you're looking back. The final quote that I think is really valuable here is the goal is not just to sell to people who need what you have. The goal is to work with people who believe what you believe. This is a fascinating one. I think everyone is in sales, especially if you're in a family dynamic, if you've got a group of friends, if you've got colleagues. Anytime you're in relationships, there's some aspect of that. Here's a reflection question to really unpack that quote. I'll read the quote one more time. The goal is not just to sell to people who need what you have. The goal is to work with people who believe what you believe. Here's the question. How can you find and connect with individuals or communities who share similar beliefs or values? And how does this alignment lead to more meaningful relationships and collaborations? Here's 3 ways to unpack it. One is identifying target audiences or partners who resonate with your mission and values. Sometimes you see people that work together, go out and maybe go to dinner or drinks after work together. It's because they have shared experiences. Those are meaningful relationships and they grow deeper by having some of those social aspects. When you think of your target audiences or partners who resonate with your mission values, the first person you should think of is your spouse or your partner or your boyfriend or girlfriend. That person, if they don't resonate with your mission and values, if they don't have similar goals, if they don't have similar values that drive and motivate them, then you're going to inevitably deviate from one another. My wife and I, we dated before dating apps were a thing. We had social media when I was in college, so that's how we reached out to one another. Today, it's different. People present themselves in so many different ways online, especially, that it's really hard to identify if this is a group of people that you actually resonate with the same beliefs. In order to have more meaningful relationships and collaborations, whether it's in your personal, professional, or digital lives, you have to engage in a deeper level of conversation. The second way to unpack that question is engaging in authentic communication that fosters shared understanding and connection. A lot of our why really spills out from our relationships, and a lot of our values are reinforced by who we spend our time with. engaging in authentic communication, whether it's reaching out to someone to celebrate something positive that's happened in their life, reaching out directly, not just liking or commenting on a social media post, but reaching out directly, a text, a call, a face to face conversation, or if they have had something negative happen, providing some critique and some input in a way that is not going to derail the relationship, but hopefully actually build it up. Engaging in that kind of authentic communication is going to deepen your relationships and increase your network of people who believe what you believe. And the third way is collaborating with like-minded individuals to create a collective impact and achieve common goals and have shared experiences. One phenomenon of this that is going to be an interesting example is Pokemon Go. When Pokemon Go came out, it was that app where you would throw Pokeballs and collect all the different Pokemon out there. Some people still play it. There's still a community around that. I remember distinctly being a part of this phenomena where all of a sudden all these like-minded individuals would show up in person outside and interact with one another. There was a lot of novelty to it. It was something that was countercultural for its time. It was inspiring, and a lot of people really got into it. On a very surface level, it's something that you can have a collective experience with. Some people from that found relationships and found friendships, and maybe they found that there were other things outside of a game that was inspiring to them. It's not something to be discounted. Similar things happen with sports teams where like-minded individuals show up all together to support some collective experience and maybe a mutual goal that's happening. And then from that, a lot of positive things can happen. The most important part is showing it. You can't participate in those experiences if you don't show up, if you're not collaborating with like-minded individuals, and then helping to really understand what your values are and where you're coming from. These are all examples of good work, of great relationships, of ways that you can really identify what your why is, reinforce it, find it, and refine it over time. It's going to evolve as you change as well. To wrap things up, my goal here is to focus on helping young families achieve their financial goals. When I think of finding your why, your financial goals start with defining your purpose and defining what you want and what you need. If you're seeking that out, I encourage you to subscribe to this content to really identify and refine what you want, what you need. I'll see you next week.